Hey all everybody, welcome to my complete series spoiler episode discussing the Moth. Basically what this is going to be is me rambling about Lost throughout the length of the Moth's runtime, the Moth being Season 1 Episode 7 of Lost. And like I said, this is going to be with full series spoilers. If this is your first time listening to one of these, then you should know that you do not have to watch along with me. I will try and make it clear which scene I'm talking about if I'm talking about a specific scene on screen. And that way you guys can just kind of listen to this as a podcast episode. Now that said, if you want to watch along with me, you are welcome to do so. And as such, I'm going to let you know now that I am pressing play, and I will tell you when the first image appears on the screen. And here we go. We've got the guitar chords as Charlie starts playing. So yeah, I'm sure you're close enough. All right, so I will start my random ramblings with by saying that other than my White Rabbit episode, which ended up having that audio glitch, I have struggled a little bit with having things to say throughout the length of these episodes. Now, what I am kind of excited about is that starting with episode 9 and definitely going into episode 10, I know that's where we start getting more mythology stuff in these episodes, stuff that I can actually really share my thoughts and interpretations on, at some length. So far, these first several episodes, it's mostly character stuff, which is awesome, but doesn't leave a whole lot for me to talk about that hasn't already been covered by the main podcast episodes with my co-host and in the group discussion episodes with first-time viewers. Having two full-length episodes talking about character stuff before I sit down to do this means there's not a whole lot left for me to say, because obviously the character stuff, I guess there's a little bit of character stuff I could talk about with the context of the full series. I can kind of point out like, oh, this is what this is foreshadowing, or on a second viewing, like, I appreciate this more because I know where this is headed, things like that. But yeah, my point is, I may struggle a bit with this one. We'll see. And I may struggle with next week's too. But I think with episodes 9 and 10, and 11, and hopefully going forward from there, it'll be a bit easier. Or there will be a bit, I'll have a lot more to say, is I guess what I'm trying to say. But okay, now we are in the confession booth with Charlie. I guess what I have to say about this is, in the group discussion, Julia kind of had a more unique interpretation of Charlie's flashback storyline, and in this scene in particular, based on her life experiences and such. She had the perspective that Charlie's faith here was causing him to feel shame, or it's causing him to, or that it's encouraging him to turn away from this beautiful thing that he's doing, this beautiful part of himself, that is writing music and performing with Driveshaft. Yeah, I had never really heard that before, and that's never really been my take on this. Not to say that that's invalid in any way. Um, I do think the priest here tells Charlie that he has a choice, or that we all have choices, and so he has to. We all face temptations, and giving into them is a choice. And so Charlie is the one that decides, he chooses to just avoid the temptation, or take himself out of these situations that are presenting him with the temptation. I don't know personally that I feel that it's the priest's role to tell Charlie, like, well, no, it's not your. You should keep playing the music. Just don't give in to the temptations. If Charlie thinks the only way that he can really trust himself not to give in to the temptation is to give up that lifestyle, I don't know that the priest is the one to say that that's the right or wrong choice. That's my personal opinion. And a lot of what Julia said, as Drew kept pointing out, does become something the show explores later on quite a bit in different ways, most similarly to what Julia was saying in Echo's final episode in season 3. That whole episode, it starts with him as a kid trying to steal to feed his brother, and he kind of at the end is encouraged to repent for everything he's ever done, specifically killing a man to save his brother's life, and Echo kind of rejects that manipulation. The monster is trying to shame Echo into obedience. Basically, he wants him to repent and confess, so that the monster, pretending to be Yimmy, can prescribe the penance, which, who's to say what the monster would have had him do. Could have been any number of things. So yeah, it is kind of funny because Julia, I never felt the things Julia was saying about this episode, but later stuff, especially the cost of living episode that I was just talking about, that one definitely, that's a huge theme of that. Trying to replay in my head what I was just talking over. I was kind of waiting for somebody to point out, or not point out, but to question the presence of bottle rockets on the plane. Doesn't really bother me too much, but I do wonder, like, how difficult that would have, like how likely that is that somebody could have smuggled those on a plane 3 years after 9/11. I don't know. I guess I don't have a good sense for how in depth airport security was at that time. So now we're at the scene where Kate is trying to get the laptop battery for Sawyer, and she's very mean. That's something that I talked about before. I'm not sure why she's so mean. Actually, you know what? So now that I'm sitting here asking myself this question, because I don't like to nitpick things like that without really kind of trying to figure out for myself what the answer might be. And thinking of it now, if I remember right, this might have been something I was talking through. I think Sawyer gives Kate crap about Jack. Like, Sawyer refers to it as their breakup. Last episode ended with Jack moving to the caves and Kate staying on the beach, and they were getting really close right up until that point, and then they're just kind of like breakups, not the word I would use, but it's a bit of a falling out. They're not living in the same place anymore, and they're not on the same page about that. So I think she's upset about that, and then Sawyer gives her crap for it, and so then she's irritated with Sawyer. I think that actually makes it. There you go. I solved my own problem. So yeah, there you go. So now we're in the flashback where Liam's begging Charlie to join, or, to continue playing with the band because they just got signed. And he's telling him, like, it's your music that got us signed. You're the one that wrote it. You are bloody. God damn it. You are Bloody Drive Shaft. The band's nothing without you. And then, he's telling him that he'll look out for him. So yeah, this fits with what I talked a lot about with my co-host, and then with Julia and Drew, about Liam being the butterfly and Charlie being the moth. Charlie is the one that spun silk. He's the one that brings meaning. He's the one that produces the songs and the thing that makes the band. He brings the value to it. Liam, like he just said about himself, he's just the pretty face that sings the songs, kind of like the butterfly. And that, of course, when you see them on stage later, they're cheering his name, and that goes to his head. And he says to Charlie later that nobody even knows who the bass player is. And he says, "I am Drive Shaft." Anyways, I only recently stumbled upon Lostpedia pointing out the Liam being the butterfly element of the moth metaphor, and definitely digging it. And now Charlie's getting upset because Jack keeps getting told that he's like in the way, or he's not needed. So now he's yelling at Jack. Jack says, "Let me look at you." He's like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna look after me, huh?" Just again, like we talked about in the podcast, Jack obviously is a stand-in for Liam on the island. And Jack is now buried in the rocks. Now we have the scene where Kate and Saeed are discussing. Well, they start by discussing the signal, but they're talking about what are the odds of us surviving a plane crash. Saeed saying, like, the way this crash happened, we should not have survived, especially not with a few scrapes. And then Kate's attitude is like, things just happen, no rhyme, no reason. And like I was telling Julia, I feel like there's two ways to read this scene as a viewer, especially as a first-time viewer. You could read it as the show speaking through Saeed and kind of telling you, hey, that was weird. We're aware that it's weird, and there's probably going to be some kind of explanation for it later on. Or you could read it as the show telling you through Kate that, like, look, something's just happened. This is just part of the premise of the show. Just accept it and move on. And the funny thing is even with the completed series, I feel like you can still read it either way. Because I don't know. I think some people probably would argue that Jacob's protection, like Jacob touching people, has something to do with them surviving the crash. And I don't think that I agree with that, because I'm drawing a blank on an example, but I want to say that we know that not all of the survivors are candidates. For some reason, I'm not able to pull up an example off the top of my head. I mean, I feel like Rose isn't a candidate. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember the names that are on the wall. So I had some kind of. I know some people think that she was. I don't know. My point is, sorry, I'm getting distracted by my dog. You all right? Here. What was I saying? My point was, I'm pretty sure, I wish I could think of an example. I'm pretty sure not everybody that survived it is a candidate, but also, more importantly, probably, is the fact that Jacob's touch does not prevent people from dying in pretty much any other way besides, like, it prevents the monster from being able to kill them. A lot of people would argue it also prevents them from being able to kill themselves. I actually don't believe that. I know that's a more controversial thing to say. I'm trying to think if I want to get into that or not here, because that is going to be a video essay at some point. I guess I can bottom line that without getting into all the evidence for why I think there's a lot of evidence that nobody is mystically prevented from killing themselves in the show. There are instances where it seems like that's what's happening, but if you really pay attention, there's actually other stuff going on there. But yeah, to bottom line it, Jacob's whole philosophy about letting people choose, I don't think that it makes any sense. Like, he allows the candidates to kill other candidates. Why wouldn't he allow them to kill themselves? You know, if they're choosing to kill themselves, you know, whether he agrees with it or not. I mean, he lets people do all kinds of evil things that he doesn't agree with or he doesn't want them to do. He lets them inflict suffering on other people. Why wouldn't he let them do it to themselves? That's never made any sense to me. And again, I think that there's actually a lot of evidence that in the story that suggests something else is going on and people are misinterpreting certain things. Like, okay, so again, I want to save some of these examples because some of them I think nobody has noticed before. I mean, I've never seen anybody point out certain things that I'm really excited to point out in future video essays or a future video essay. But I can point out some more obvious things, like, you know, Jack getting ready to jump off a bridge. You know, he doesn't end up jumping because this car accident happens, and then he goes and he has to save this lady and her kid. But nothing weird happened there. Like, there's nothing, you don't have to read anything mystical into that. He was standing on the bridge. This distracted her. and she crashed her car. It just makes sense that he would, that what the way things happen, it makes sense without reading like some mystical interference happening there. Trying to think of another example that I don't have to. So I mean, okay, because this one's probably like the more blatant thing that people would point to as an example of people not being able to kill themselves. Richard with the dynamite in the final season, with Jack. Richard. Okay, so my take on that scene, right, is Richard seems under the impression that he can't kill himself. And he says his reason for believing that is because if Jacob touches you, you can't die. To me, that sounds like he's misunderstanding what Jacob did when he touched him and stopped his aging. He seems to be assuming that also is protecting him from death in other forms. Yeah. So and then as far as like why the dynamite doesn't go off when Jack's there, my take on that. This is less exciting than some of the other things that I want to point out at some point, but my interpretation of it is that Jack is in that episode accepting and having faith in Jacob choosing him for some big purpose. The last time we had seen Jack before that episode was in the lighthouse episode, and he found out Jacob was watching him, and he has that outburst where he destroys the lighthouse mirror, and then he goes and he sits on the cliff and he stares out at the ocean for a while. And as Jacob points out to Hurley, some people need to kind of do that and figure out what they need to do. And then you come into the 7th episode of season 6, and Jack is kind of accepting and having faith in whatever purpose Jacob has for him. And so I think that Jack reaching that point and just really believing that the dynamite won't go off if he's sitting there, I think he's tapping into either potential that he always had, parapsychological potential that he always had, or parapsychological abilities that Jacob has bestowed upon him that he's just now being able to access because he's believing in it. Basically, I think he's manifesting the reality that the fuse goes out. I don't think it's because Jacob touched him, and then he's the one that lit the fuse. I don't think those two things are what makes the fuse magically go out. I've talked before about how I don't like explanations of things that are just, because it's magic. Jacob just magically can make that the case. I prefer the more parapsychological explanation that there's like a psychic thing that's happening there. To me, that's a more science fiction thing. It follows a more, obviously it's still fictional, and obviously in a way it's still kind of magical, but like it follows a more defined rule set. And that's what I like about that. I'm losing my train of thought. Puts out the fuse. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say another bit of evidence that I think kind of supports my interpretation of that dynamite scene is the way the passing of the torch, if you will, works between protectors of the island, right? There's absolutely no consistency. We get 3 separate scenes near the end of the series showing the role of protector being handed down from one person to another. And if you look at all 3 of those scenes, there is not a single common thread as far as like the physical acts being performed. The first time around, Mother has Jacob drink from this wine that she spoke Latin over. And then she says, okay, you're like me. Then you have Jacob with Jack, And Jacob takes water from the stream, also says Latin over it, and has Jack drink, and then says, "You're like me." Then you have Jack to Hurley, and Jack gets water from the stream, but he doesn't say the Latin over it, and he has Hurley drink. So again, there's nothing that all three of those things share as far as what's physically happening. The Latin is only said 2 out of 3 times. The water's only drank 2 out of the 3 times. And so ultimately, in my opinion, the way that ritual works in each of those, like the reason it works in each of those cases, is because the people that are involved in it believe in it. Like they choose and accept the responsibility. And yeah, it is by believing in it that they are manifesting it to be real. So yeah, that's I point to that, and then compare that to the dynamite scene, and that's kind of why I don't feel like it's so outlandish to have that interpretation of the dynamite scene. And not only that, I think it makes more sense to me, or it's more it's easier for me to accept than just Jacob touches you, you can't kill yourself, which means that dynamite fuses will just magically stop burning. Anyways, I think that's enough rambling about that. Yeah, so what the hell was I even talking about? Oh, so wow, all this from that one little scene in this episode that has nothing to do with the rest of the story. Yeah, so Kate and Said are talking about that. And yeah, I was saying that I feel like even after you've completed the show, you can still kind of read that scene either way, because I don't think that the show really argues for some magical. I don't think the show really gives us strong evidence for an explanation for why people survived without injury. I do kind of, lean more towards Kate's argument. Like it happened, it just happened. Sometimes crazy shit happens. I mean, you could say, I think if you did want to look for an explanation, like if you didn't need one, I don't know. I was gonna say the healing properties of the island might help a bit, but I don't know, because it's pretty rare that instant healing is a thing. So I don't know. It's all subjective, is my point. But yeah, I think I lean a little bit more towards Kate's opinion on it. Well, and it's like Julia said in the group discussion. She said, maybe it'll eventually become a faith thing. Like maybe they survived for a reason. I mean, you could read it as fate. They were meant to survive it. That's obviously how Locke reads it. So yeah, I think that's enough about that. We're already to the part where Charlie's gonna take the heroin. It's funny because at our recent screening of Confidence Man, before we started that episode, I was talking to Will, because he caught up separately on the last couple episodes, and he expressed, Drew might have expressed it too, the one that didn't come to the Moth screening. They're like, okay, well that was a big leap, that in that moment to take heroin for the first time, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of agreed in the past, but this time around, like we talked about in the main podcast episode, really trying to put myself in Charlie's shoes and accepting that's the thing that's there, and the depth of that pain that he's feeling in that moment. I think it works for me. I do. Because that's the thing that I think I appreciated more this time around too, is like, again, Charlie it's funny what Liam does in that scene. He kind of tells Charlie that without being part of the band, like, he's useless. Like, he has no purpose or use outside of that band. So how dare he threaten to walk away from it? While at the same time telling him, nobody even knows who the bass player is. He's saying, I'm Drive Shaft. So he's kind of taking away the the whole meaning that Charlie found in it to begin with. So he's kind of like making Charlie feel like he has to have the band while also taking away the meaning that the band brought him. And then add in just having your brother of all people say those things to you. You take all of that into account, and I think you can feel like just the deep existential pain that Charlie's feeling in that moment. And again, it's not like he sought out the heroin; it's literally the thing that's sitting there. And I have no doubt that he wasn't thinking like, well, I'm going to start doing this from now on. I think it was, well, in this moment. And then, of course, it turns into that. So yeah, all that's to say, I felt very much the same. That it seemed like quite a jump. I have felt that way in the past, but this time, talking about it and thinking about it more deeply, I do think it works for me. So Jack's shoulder is dislocated. Charlie's about to fix it. A manner of speaking. Pulling my notes back up. And yeah, so now we're at the scene right before, like the day before, I guess. Charlie gets on the plane. And yeah, basically Charlie's coming to Liam, asking him the same thing that Liam once asked him. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to be able to say it better than my uncle did. Yeah, he had a great way of putting what this is, and how messed up it is. So what I'll talk about is, this is something I don't know that I've ever heard anybody question, but I could see somebody questioning it. But yeah, hypothetically. In this episode, like right now, Charlie's in the clothes he's wearing when he crashes on the island. And at the end of this conversation, he tells Liam that I have a flight to catch. Then, in the season finale, see, now I'm wondering if this is actually listed as a plot hole in the season finale, in which case I will probably end up addressing it in the podcast, in my not actually a plot hole semi-recurring segment. Anyways, but yeah, just in case it's not, I'll talk about it now. Yeah, I think it's as simple as his flight's the next morning. He's saying, yeah, I have a flight to catch. Like, I'm all right, fuck you. You don't want to come. Like, I'm going anyways. I don't need your help. You're not actually looking out for me. But yeah, I think his flight was actually the next morning. He hooks up with that girl, and in the morning he wakes up late, and so he just has to throw on the clothes. I mean, he may have still been in the clothes from the previous night. So yeah, all of that's my. I'll probably, if it is listed as a plot hole in the season finale, I'm sure I will articulate that better in the actual podcast. But yeah, I think it's that simple. Like, just he's rushing he's rushing out the door in that scene. So I think it makes sense that he's in the clothes from the day before. Oh, and now we have the scene where Charlie references some imaginary conversation he had with Jack in the Jungle. In the episode as it exists, it's kind of played as just a joke. But on the podcast, we talked about how there actually was a scripted scene where Charlie has a hallucination of Jack in the Jungle. And yeah, the thing I wanted to mention here is, like, I do think if that had been in the show, which I said before, I think it was a good thing it got cut. But if it had, I absolutely would have interpreted that as the monster pulling, it's the standard MO as the series progresses, is that, people in mentally vulnerable states, such as Charlie's withdrawal, the monster is able to project sensory illusions to them. He doesn't, in those circumstances where they are mentally vulnerable, he doesn't take corporeal forms, which he can only do of people that are dead. I hate saying it like that because, as I've talked about before too, like, in my opinion, just because, again, the magical nonsense of, well, he can only take the form of the dead. My interpretation of that is, in order to physically replicate a living being, he has to break down their DNA, like on a molecular level. He has to break them down, and I think that nobody or no creature can survive that process, and therefore, to replicate a living person would be to kill them. And since he can't kill candidates, that's why he can't take their form until they are dead. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because I do strongly feel that way, just from my personal interpretation of it. Like that's yeah. And so therefore I feel weird saying he can only take the form of the dead. But my point is that he can project non-corporeal experiences to people when they are not completely when they don't have a complete handle on their mental faculties. For example, the dreams, which I will be talking about in episode 10 for sure. Yeah, but there are plenty of dreams throughout the series that are basically just accepted to be the Man in Black because, they kind of have to be. And, I'll certainly be talking a lot about those as we get to them. But yes, the dreams are like the big example. Like if a person's unconscious, he can influence their dreams psychically. And I think that if they are in waking but less conscious states, such as a feverish state or a withdrawal state, or an exhausted state, a dehydrated state, what have you, I think he can also influence perceptions a bit. And yeah, that's how you get things like Taller Ghost Walt, in my opinion, or the Altar Boy in season 3 is probably a less controversial example, which I use a lot because it's less controversial. Anyways, so yeah, if that scene were in there, I think they would have been like, oh yeah, it's another example of, like, I think you could look at that as the suggestion that they kind of knew the nature of the monster and what it was doing at this point. Yeah. Anyways, now we are at the part where Saeed's about to get attacked, and I guess I'll talk about that a little bit because, I couldn't talk about who it was without spoiling it for other people. We do eventually, near the end of the season, find out that it was Locke. And while I think that makes the most sense as far as, like, it being the beach people just because he didn't have an alibi, and he would have had a motive, sort of. um, I I don't love the way that the answer is given, because they literally wait until the end of the season when a lot of people forgot about it, or didn't even care anymore, or maybe even just assumed that it was like Ethan or the others, because by that point in the show it was established that there are other people on this island and they had infiltrated the 815ers, and they may have wanted to prevent the 815ers from exploring other places on the island. Um, so yeah, the point is, by the time they give the answer, I don't think anybody particularly was dying to know anymore. And it's so Locke just gives the answer. He just volunteers it as some weird move to gain Saeed's trust, which does seem counterintuitive. Like, oh, I'm trying to get you to trust me. Well, so I'll confess something to you, that you're obviously not gonna love hearing. uh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just don't love the way that answer was given, and it's another example of the type of answer that maybe we didn't need. Like I think if they had never brought it up again, I think it would have made sense to assume it was Ethan. Yeah, right. um, or maybe they could have at some point mentioned that it was Ethan or something, but I don't know. I guess that I don't know how much more time I've got. Okay, so I'll kind of use that as something I was thinking about earlier today. Is I do. Part of me wonders, watching it this time around, if like from the beginning they knew there was going to be this other group of people on the island that were already there. The others. Because watching these episodes week to week like this, in the little conflicts, and the way the group splits into, the cave camp and the beach camp, part of me suspects that the original plan, or the way that they were kind of thinking things would go, was that it would just be them. Maybe eventually you'd have the tail section people or something like that, but like basically the main conflict of the show would have been like two groups against each other. And I think the reason that they may have decided to introduce the others, and I think it was absolutely the right call. I think the point the others serve in the show, and the conflict with the others serve, is kind of the nature of conflict or even war, and just the idea of otherizing, if that's the right term, other groups of people. Obviously, they're called the others. Obviously, that is meant. I think that's on purpose. But that wouldn't have worked if it was a conflict between two groups of characters that you've already come to know and love, people on both sides. I think you needed this other mysterious group who you don't know, to kind of, that way you're kind of on the 815ers. You see things the way they do. It's like, okay, these others, they're a threat. They need to be killed, like in the case of Ethan, or tortured, like Ben in the next season, or just any number of things. It becomes, they become the enemy. We are in the credits now, so I'm just going to finish up this little ramble thing and then do my credits. They. Oh yeah, sorry. Goddamn. You need them. You need to feel like they're the enemy too, in order for that to work. You need to have the audience feel the same way that the characters do about the enemy. And then as time goes on, and maybe the show could have done a better job of this, although I don't think they do an awful job of it. then you gradually get to know the others, and you find out, like, okay, like, yeah, they did some stuff that was not right, and arguably evil in some instances, but they had their own set of motivations, and if we were watching this show from their perspective, we would probably feel a very similar way to what we do with the 815ers, in that there would be characters that we don't like, and that we're like, why would you do this? Why would, that's messed up and not right. But then there would be plenty of other characters who you like, and who are good people, and whose backstories kind of flesh them out in a way that you're like, you completely are with them. And even the characters you don't like and don't agree with, you have their backstories, and you kind of understand them and empathize with them, even though you don't like or agree with them. Really, basically, if you take the others as we eventually come to know them as deeply as we do, compared to the 815ers, there's not really a difference. Like, both groups do bad things, for bad reasons, or misguided reasons, I should say, and if you actually try to, at least, you can understand the motivations. I can't get into all this right now. It's way too late, and it would take way too long. But people have a lot of issues with, like, Ben and the others not taking in the 815ers or reaching out to them, and there's just so many reasons that would not be a sensible decision for Ben or them to make, not knowing these people, and the things that they have to worry about, such as Charles Woodmore trying to infiltrate the island. I mean, there's just so much there, and it really does make the most strategic sense for Ben to do what he does in sending, a spy to each camp, and trying to assess who these people are and which ones might be good to kind of absorb into your community without being overwhelmed by all of these people who have different views, than you, and who wouldn't be willing to stay on the island. And you can't really send them back after revealing yourselves. I mean, arguably, yeah, they wouldn't want to send them back, period, if it could lead somebody back to the island. Anyways, like I said, I'll get into that much deeper, as the show goes on. I don't even remember why I started talking about that. Oh, the others and the others and the 815ers. The point is that yeah, I think maybe the others was something that wasn't. It was kind of thought up as they got to around this point of the show, because I think they were starting to realize that in order to tell that type of story about conflict, and the dangers and the senselessness of it, I think it works better to have the audience on a specific side for a while. And I don't know that would have happened, again, if it was two groups of people that we had already come to love certain characters on each side of it. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. It's late and I'm tired, and I'll end this by saying that, obviously I'm still playing a bit of catch up here, because this will be coming out basically on the same day as later today will be Confidence Man, and then a week from today the podcast episode for Solitary will come out, and then there will be a hiatus week, in between Solitary and Raised by Another, because 20 years ago, there was a hiatus week, and these episodes are coming out. The main podcast episodes are coming out on the 20th anniversary of the episodes we're discussing. So what that means is, yeah, there will be a hiatus week. Then there will be the 10th episode. Then the next episode, then the next week is the 11th episode. Then there will be a few weeks of hiatus before coming back in January with the 12th episode. Again, that's because that's how it worked 20 years ago. So the good news with that is that I will not only definitely be able to catch up to a regular schedule with these other two types of episodes, but I will start to be able to backlog these because we are going to continue recording the podcast weekly, even though there are going to be some hiatus weeks, and we're going to continue doing the group screenings weekly. We'll take a couple weeks off for the holidays, for Christmas and New Year's, but yeah, the point is we'll start to have a real head start on the release schedule, and that will be nice. So yeah, as always, thank you for bearing with me. Yeah, I guess I need to do my credits now. Thank you to candidate number 90, Ben Ward. Candidate number 108, Jeffrey Winslow. Candidate number 69, Brian Phillips. Candidate number 32, Chuck Boyd. And candidate 341, Hans. If you too would like to become a candidate, you can do so for as little as $1. Even just a one-time donation of that amount will get you a permanent spot on the candidate cave wall, which will be displayed in all future video versions of this podcast, as well as any other Lost-related videos I make. And one donation will get you credited verbally in each podcast episode released over those next 30 days. If you decide to sign up for recurring donations, then you will continue to be thanked verbally or credited verbally for as long as you are an active donor. So yeah, if you want to do that, you can go to ko-fi.com/candlepun or patreon.com/candlepun. And just because I haven't been saying it, if you want to support this podcast in other ways, you can leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to this on, or you can, if you're using YouTube, you can like the video, comment on it. Any kind of engagement helps with that. Also, speaking of engagement, I don't have any fan messages to address this week. Please, if you guys, I want these to be a conversation too. That would really help. Having specific things in mind to talk about would be great. So yeah, if you want to talk to me, feel free to comment on the YouTube videos, or send an email to dr.candlepun@gmail.com. And you can send that as a written message, an audio message, or even a video link. And I guess the video links, because these spoilery commentaries are audio only, I guess there would be no real point of sending a video link. But if you wanted to send a video to be featured on the podcast proper, by all means you can do that, and we'll get you included, as long as you're not talking about anything spoilery, because in order to be on the main podcast episode, I don't want to spoil anything for my co-host, since he doesn't really remember a lot. Anyways, so yeah, I hope to hear from you guys. I hope to continue to hear from you guys. You guys have been, some of you have been sending in messages and comments and stuff, and it's been a little delayed sometimes. There's some comments that we just addressed in our solitary recording last week that were basically the comments that we addressed there. You still got to wait a week to get the podcast episode and hear us address those things. So yeah, I do realize that it might seem like you're waiting a long time to hear back from us. That's where these spoilery episodes will get more and more, since these are going to be recorded basically the day before they go up. Even So these will never be backlogged. So I will always be able to address the most recent comments on here if we haven't addressed them on the podcast. Yeah, so for whatever that's worth. But okay, I think that's everything I have. Until next time, namaste and good luck.